If you're wanting to flee the scene of a major crime, or for that matter go on a holiday somewhere sort of slightly outside your city, in anyone's books, criminally inclined or otherwise, the vehicle on your screen is not a good pick. A baby Austin A35 built in 1959 is, to put it mildly, a rather bad decision. Made more so given you have trolled the streets to find a suitable getaway car to convert, and this was the set of wheels you so chose. And this sorry decision-making process will become more starkly obvious to the two occupants of the stolen Austin A35 in the early hours of August the 15th, 1975. In their rear vision mirror was a fleet of 7 police Holden Kingswoods, driving straight up their arse, sirens blaring. This unequal battle of horsepower was over in an hour, until the occupants knew there was no way they were going to escape their pursuers. Not before the couple had at one point driven side by side with one of the Holdens trying to push it off the road, gone down one ways the wrong way, and straight through red lights. The couple in the Austin were clearly highly motivated to avoid capture. But from what? An event that infamously became New Zealand's very first entry into the Global Terrorism Database, tracking political and religious acts of violence. This. By the time the Christchurch Star came out that evening, the two, a man and a woman, were in custody, now facing serious charges and probable jail time. Who were these desperados? What motivated them to commit a crime that meets the dictionary description of terrorism? To answer the latter, we really need to have a look at the state of geopolitics and its implications for New Zealand. The world in the 1970s was firmly divided into West and East, communism versus capitalism. Maoism pitted itself against traditional Marxism-Leninism. No walls had yet come down. The Battle of Belize inevitably spilt over into a war or two. Korea and Vietnam were the biggies, in which New Zealand played a peripheral role and took sides with her allies. Britain's international influence having waned post-World War II, the major military ally New Zealand now had was the United States. Along with that, American culture in the form of television, films and music were being more prevalent. There was, and still is, one country any self-respecting socialist hates: the United States of America. This is where I introduce you to the couple in the car. Margaret Matheson, Neil Reithmuller, both Canterbury University students, both ardent anti-American protesters, as those photos from the student magazine Cantor attest. Reithmuller was an Australian and a veteran of protest movements across the Tasman. Self-prescribed anarchists, a term I struggle with, as they also dabbled in far-left politics, more government intervention, not less, a strange synergy. They were also a girlfriend and boyfriend. Passionate members of the Progressive Youth Movement, an offshoot of the New Zealand Communist Party, the Auckland branch of which dubbed themselves Mao's Angels. The Progressive Youth Movement in Christchurch wanted capitalism dismantled and all private property ceded to the state. Reithmuller was certainly the more intense of the two. His flat where he lived with a couple of other fellow anarchists became the de facto HQ for the local members of the Progressive Youth Movement and was within easy walking distance, ironically, of Christchurch's US Consulate. This place. Please quickly dismiss any mental images you have about a fully fledged embassy. It was an honorary position operating infrequently at best from the offices of a medium-sized accountancy office, which didn't have a single US citizen in their employment, not even the honorary Consular General, Bill Quirk, one of the 3 partners of the business. Quirk's business had become an unwarranted beacon for anti-American sentiment in Christchurch. The year before the firebombing, it had been tagged with "You raped Vietnam," "fascists" and "murderers." The fact 3 decades prior, 300,000 American soldiers had died and 1 million wounded fighting Nazi Germany didn't stop swastikas being sprayed on the walls as well. The harassment even went as far as Quirk's house getting tagged and his family intimidated by late night drive-bys. One of Reithmuller's flatmates, come anarchist, Richard Bolstad, said Reithmuller had told him at one stage that they were peace campaigners, therefore, that wanted peace only overseas. Under the harrowing shadow of the 2019 Christchurch mosque terrorist shooting, Reithmuller would like the record to show it was different to connect using a gun to shoot people rather than setting a building on fire. Molotov cocktail good, submachine gun bad. He'd always argued the bombing was a spur-of-the-moment event and that the time was picked to ensure no one would be hurt. This is the very same person that you may remember happily drove through red lights and into oncoming traffic, attempted to run a police vehicle off the road, got out of the car and rather than surrender, juked it out. Most crimes are, of course, committed in the wee smalls, not to diminish the impact on the victims. Rather, the criminals know there will be less chance of getting caught. Face covers and gloves like they wore that night also tend to point to premeditation. Unfortunately for Reithmuller and Matheson, they were spotted at the scene by a security guard driving past who called the police, and it was him that began the chase. Reithmuller may try and mitigate his actions today, as he did at the time, and now look back in his dotage with some form of regret, only a bit. But if we were to again look back at the photo outside the court as to any indication, it appears to me at least, at the time, he revelled in the kudos he got within his clique. Matheson was more circumspect. She could, as one of the defence lawyers told the judge, fall back on what he termed the foolish noise of youth. After all, she was just 19. Reithmuller was 27. Matheson, though, was hardly blameless. An innocent party simply led astray by her boyfriend. Termed the United States as warmongering, through her veil of hatred, failed to see that it was North Vietnam that invaded South Vietnam, with the aid of China operating under her beloved demigod Mao, as well as communist Russia as sidekicks bent on increasing their sphere of interest into Asia. If stopping global superpowers getting involved in wars was your thing, then any day of the week the Russian state had a vessel from their fishing fleet moored to the wharf at Littleton Harbour, and there was bound to have been a Russian dictionary in the Canterbury University Library to cobble together a half-decent placard. It was also her that spread the accelerant inside the offices. She is also on record as stating, the couple both admitted the charges in front of them. Reithmuller was up for arson, burglary, car theft and dangerous driving. Matheson, arson, burglary and unlawfully getting into a stolen car, an embarrassing one at that. Both pled guilty, and exactly a month to the day they were sentenced. Reithmuller got 4 years, Matheson 3. At sentencing, Justice MacArthur summed the situation up beautifully. Every person in New Zealand is entitled to hold and to state views on matters of this kind, but he must do so peaceably and within the law, otherwise this country would soon descend into anarchy. A fitting choice of words, one thinks. On that very subject, this isn't actually the first video I've done on a New Zealand anarchist and things that go bang. Neil Roberts did the unimaginable in 1982. He blew himself up to get his point across. A link for that video is below in the description. Once out of the slammer, Reithmuller was extradited back home. Matheson decided to join him in Australia. Clearly she was infatuated and had a rather short memory. You see, at the first court appearance, Reithmuller farcically feigned a mental breakdown, for want of a better term. He told the court, "I don't know what's going on here. I understand I was here for murder." No one, of course, believed him. Happy to leave her in the lurch in court, and sadly for her sake, not when it came to going down the aisle. They went on to have 2 kids and got divorced, and Matheson returned to New Zealand with their offspring and faded into obscurity. Reithmuller still carries on his crusades to today, and this is him in 2019 at the Toowoomba World Environmental Day in front of a crowd of 6. Who would have thought it? The character played by Rick Mail in The Young Ones would have become a fashion icon for faded anarchists. The $12,000 of repairs to the office meant it was up and going a month later, and Bill Quirk staunchly continued on with his role. Reithmuller and Matheson were somewhat fortuitous that none was injured in the affair. The explosion that took place at the height of the fire was loud enough to wake up an entire neighbourhood. They put firemen at the scene in danger. The firemen certainly weren't aware that this was an arson and accelerants could still be inside the premise, posing a serious risk to anyone in the vicinity. Quirk was also a notorious early riser and often worked odd hours. And then there was the hightailing it, running red lights, etc. This is the office location today, in case you were wondering. Were a similar attack like this to occur today, in light of the current environment of the global political and religious terrorism, plus being Christchurch, you could probably now put a 0 on the end of those sentences from 1975. That's all from me today. And quick reminder, if you haven't already seen it, the Whanganui Computer Centre Suicide 1982. Thanks for popping by and getting this far into things, supporting my low-tech, high-research channel. I will spot you next time. Bye for now.